folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back here for part two of the discussion about the defense from that Steelers game with Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
Doing great, Ken. No complaints. How about yourself?
Other than those REI gloves, which I'm hoping to get a refund on and turn them into dog toys, no, none at all. And thank you for noting their 1-year return policy. If you didn't, one of the most important things discussed in that first episode was clearly the lack of waterproofness on the waterproof gloves that I bought on that very cold day. That it would have been nice to have actual waterproof gloves. Anyway,
easily top three things you could have learned from that.
Yeah. There was a lot of other stuff. Seriously, folks, the Ravens pass rush, pretty good day. Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy having a lot of fun out there. We saw Trenton Simpson running around. We'll talk about him a little more in the second part here. And got to talk about that. We talked a little bit about, some of the business decisions that are clearly being made on the field and how that really seems reasonable to us. The Ravens are at present, and we are looking at this game right now. We are recording this episode at 2:25. So the game is approaching halftime now, correct, in Nashville?
Yeah, it looks like 29 seconds left in the first half.
The score?
Titans 21, Jags 10. And Titans are 3rd and 14, so that'll probably be that for the half.
Okay. So anyway, certainly a situation where the Ravens can hit a very unfortunate exacta if Tennessee beats Jacksonville. The Steelers in the playoffs, and I don't have any problem with that. But the unfortunate thing is that the Bills Miami game, then, if Buffalo loses, they'll be the 7 seed. After the wild card round, the playoffs are reseeded. So the 7 seed, if they survive, automatically goes to visit the 2 seed. So could be Buffalo coming to Baltimore in that divisional round if Buffalo loses to Miami tonight. Now, more than likely, it won't end up being that way. Miami will go and they'll have to play Kansas City, and I guess who ends up being the 7 seed? Pittsburgh will go to Buffalo for that game, and it'll be somebody else's. Buffalo will be somebody else's problem for at least one more week going through that. Anyway, first thing we do on these is individual discussion of the players, and I think we're going to temper this by saying that some individual discussion is not particularly productive after a game like this, but there's some interesting individual notes for it. So, Slava, start us off. Who'd you like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the person that jumps out for all of us watching that game would be Trenton Simpson, who had himself a fine half of football. He started the second half first next to Delshon Phillips, and then Phillips went down, so Patrick Queen went back in, and Simpson really showed a lot of explosiveness, a lot of speed. He was one of these players that definitely had something to prove. If he was given the same memo that the other players were given to sort of, play a little softer, play a little slower, he ignored it. He showed, some explosiveness on an unblocked sack where he was fast enough to get past the right guard and really show some ability to really not just get to the quarterback, but bring him down clean. Showed some sideline to sideline speed in the run game. Promising start for him.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, he moved around the field pretty well. My first question is, if Patrick Queen's going to be told not to be physical in the way he clearly was yesterday, if he has to play that unphysical game, that lack of block shedding, I'm not sure why he's out there in the first half. If you got to take it that easy, just go ahead and put Trent Simpson out there to start, and take a risk for your special teams unit. And we watched Delshon Phillips play hard as hell in that game, and to see Simpson come in the second half, okay, it might not have been pretty. They might have both gotten blocked because Simpson himself got blocked a few times on run plays, but it couldn't have looked a lot worse than it was, with Patrick Queen having a lot of trouble shedding blocks in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder whether the thought was they wanted to give Patrick Queen some rep. I'm assuming that Patrick Queen had the green dot in the beginning, so give him some reps doing that, derive some value out of that. But to me, that's kind of marginal value. I'm kind of like grasping at straws. I sort of think that it should have been Phillips and Simpson the entire game. I don't see any reason why not. Those guys both need the reps. PQ hasn't come off the field pretty much all season. Give him a rest. Give him some time off. But it is what it is. But all I can say is that Trenton Simpson made the most of his time. The only thing we didn't really get to see is him in coverage. But he should be an interesting, component to that competition next season for the starting alongside Roquan Smith.
Yeah, I think he's right there, and I think he jumps right in for Patrick. And one of the things we talked about in the first episode is just there's a lot of similarity between the two players. They're both very fast. You look at his blitz for the sack, came from off ball, much too quick for that right guard to pick him up, even if he had been looking, if he had his eyes in the right place on the play. But he's much too quick. Honestly, he probably would have been able to evade him anyway. And it just made for a very nice, clean sack. And we've seen a lot of that from Patrick Queen. That's been one of the things we've really appreciated about him in his 4 years here, his ability to get to the quarterback. Simpson being the converted safety, one of the hopes has been that he brings more to the position than Queen did in terms of his coverage thing. So I think it's very astute. You point out that we didn't really get to see that element of his game in this one.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know whether you caught this, but after the game, Patrick Queen said that he thinks that Simpson might be faster than him.
Oh yeah, I heard that. Yep.
Yeah, and could be being a good guy, gassing up his fellow player, but Simpson definitely showed some serious explosiveness and enough to get you excited about the prospects going into next season. Yeah, very, very, very positive on Simpson this game. I'll talk about another, and he had an off and on game, but he made a couple plays, and I want to have this discussion about Tavius Robinson, who he's one of the other defenders who's really getting a chance to show something, play some downs he doesn't usually play. And I'm not talking about Jeremiah Moon, because I don't think Moon really fits into their plans long term. I'd be very surprised if he has a role other than a primary practice squad, elevate him as you need him kind of player. Tavius Robinson, on the other hand, is a 4th-round draft pick, and he's a guy who has played a lot of edge in the base defense opposite Harrison this year. He did not have a particularly great game as a run defender in this one. If you look at a lot of the big plays where Ravens got blocked, I mean, I talked about this first episode. I'll risk saying it again that we look at every run of 6 or more yards, and we as part of the notes write down all of the major blocks that were involved and how that thing got set up. Well, Tavius Robinson, unfortunately, I've got a few of those notes, and Hayward, the tight end. So I want to call him Cameron Hayward, but he's not Cameron Hayward. Who's Hayward, the tight end, called? What's his name? I don't remember the guy's first name, but it's so funny. I literally had that same
Connor.
thought. It was very annoying to just. It's like just can't you guys just have one Hayward or none?
Well, you both go by the same name, David. Yeah. But C. Hayward, the tight end. So if I look at this Q1 810 blocked by tight end Hayward as part of Warren RL 23. And then he was blocked by the pulling Hayward as part of Harris RM 15, kicked out by the pulling Hayward to lead Harris RM 11, and blocked by the pulling Hayward as part of Harris RM 8. That's 4 of their longest plays the entire day, by the way. In terms of what they did, run or pass, but certainly in terms of what they did on the run. And unfortunately, it's the same play type that they kept running, obviously right at Robinson in some of these ways. So I included him in the star treatment, not because of what it was, and I really considered calling it developmental treatment in the article. By the way, I haven't put it out yet, but I was really considering using that title instead of star treatment, because somebody asked me, why did so and so get star treatment when it's not exactly that way. It's star treatment. It doesn't mean I actually thought they got a star. It's looking at all of the notes for those players.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think a couple weeks ago you mentioned that you were pretty pleased with the floor that Tavius Robinson is showing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think he can definitely develop into a nice player for us in the future. There were some mixed results. He did blow up a block in pursuit of the quarterback near the end of the first quarter, and that did end up into a completion, but he did hurry that pass. I think right now Tavius Robinson is more comfortable, like any player would be, just dealing with what's in front of him. Some of the more complex blocking schemes where things are coming, where he really has to have that awareness of the entire, what the offense is doing everywhere, is a little bit maybe beyond him at this stage in his development, which is for the most part fine, because generally the Ravens aren't asking him to do nearly as much as what he did this past game. So I think this is a real opportunity for him to learn, and I think that he he's just shown a lot of signs to me that he can give us a little bit more in the pass rush than we thought, maybe coming out of the draft, and could be another quality edge setter for the Ravens in the future, and part of that outside linebacker and / edge rotation. I think the future is looking good for him.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go with this. It's interesting. There's also seemed to be he was a Hayward magnet the whole day, because there were two other plays where Hayward pulled again to get by him on boot plays. And you mentioned one of them. There's actually two of those. Both of those times, I thought Robinson did a very good job. So I want to call out the good with the bad here. Is he the first time he kind of whiffed on Hayward, but he got to the quarterback quickly enough that it had to be thrown, 2-yard completion. Second time, he destroyed Hayward, knocked him backwards, got much closer to Rudolph in that case, still a 2-yard completion, still to Hayward on those plays that the completion went. Some of that's about who's behind Robinson is kind of beyond his control, but he did as well as he could, particularly on that second one of really knocking Hayward backwards. And fortunately, the Ravens had Matabike, who finally got out of the flat and made the tackle on that for a 2-yard play. But I thought, I think you nailed it when you said I'm real happy with the floor he's at. He's established a baseline for himself that I'm really happy with. And I was the same spot with Tyler Linderbaum last year. Did Tyler Linderbaum have some definitive on-field weaknesses? Absolutely. He really was having a lot of trouble pass blocking, and there were specific things, but he had done a lot of things like play, the vast majority of snaps. And Linderbaum missed some real small number of snaps last year. I want to say it was like 2 or something, but he basically had played the whole season. And he fixed a lot of the Ravens' snap issues for the most part. Didn't have a whole bunch of bad snaps. I thought that was good. And in terms of what he did as a pass blocker, it wasn't great, but it wasn't so far falling off the table that you said he couldn't improve to be, an average player at that. In fact, he's gone beyond that. He's become a very good pass blocker, and that's been one of the really biggest developments of 2024. So maybe next year we have something like that from Tavius Robinson. Yeah,
I mean, it's really encouraging when a late round pick or a mid round pick can become an important part of your rotation and not lose a season for development. He really has gotten some important development this season, and I think he's going to be a pretty big part of the defense next season.
I mean, maybe one player you look at and you compare where they are in the developmental curve is David Ojabo. Is it
right?
Who's in the better spot? I mean, David Ojabo's got 2 years left as a Raven, and Tavius Robinson has 3, so you start there. But in terms of what we can really trust David Ojabo to do for the Baltimore Ravens next year, would you rather have Tavius Robinson or David Ojabo just for next year? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact is, and that speaks volumes, right? Because David Ojabo is like of a certain pedigree and of a certain just innate talent that that you get excited about when you remember all the things he was able to accomplish. But then, in terms of like who do you realistically think is going to be contributing meaningful snaps to this team next season, you couldn't go wrong with saying Tavius Robinson.
Definitely a very, very wide variance player there in Ojabo, and I think the floor is really the key with Tavius Robinson. He will give this team something next year. Your turn.
Yeah, I'd probably just combine Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney. 2 veteran players. Really doing a consistent job of setting the edge and bringing pressure. They were responsible for most of the pressure throughout the game. Clowney, as I mentioned on part one, had a very Suggs-like strip sack of Rudolph, and he was playing for some incentives, but even after that, continued to do it. And honestly, like it almost feels like that these are two veteran players who've been around for a long time. They understand just how rare it is to be in the position that not only that the Ravens are in, but that they're in, at their age, that they're contributing meaningful snaps to a team that's going to be number one seed in the playoffs. I think they're, cherishing these opportunities while they have them, and they appreciate being a part of this team. I think that's sort of what you saw. I mean, maybe I'm reading into things too much, but they seem to be having a good time out there and not, grumbling their way through having to slog through a game that was, downright sloppy and couldn't have been too much fun weather-wise to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, and just watching those guys enjoy themselves on the field, even if they're just celebrating the money and they're doing that. Geno Stone seemed to get into that a little bit with Clowney in terms of the making it rain kind of dollar sign kind of things. But they did love being out there. They were really playing hard. They were enjoying this, and I think you nailed it when you say, playing for a contender at this point in their careers, when each of these guys have been in the league for 8, 9, 10 years. Is something that is a really big deal, and these guys get it. The player who's similar on the Ravens, you watched in camp at the end of his career was Terrell Suggs, and the guy everybody else hates camp. I mean, these two guys in particular, Clowney and Van Noy, are two guys who would do anything to avoid camp. Ted Williams would try and avoid spring training every season by holding out because he thought it was a waste of time. But Suggs loves camp. Oh my God, he was so into it. He's I ride my golf cart in as Bisciotti's golf cart, but he rides it into practice. And then the second most senior player, who in his last years was Brandon Williams, got to ride with him. And so that was a big honor. And then Suggs, he speaks anywhere on 3 fields, and exactly what your head turns to say something. And he's got these one-liners that he'll pull out at any particular time, which just crack you up. But the guy just loved being there, and he understood how rare and special it was. And I think that's why he got a chance at the end of his career from Arizona to walk away and go to Kansas City and get a ring. I forget if he actually did get a ring that year. Did he get a ring, or did they lose the Super Bowl? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's a two-time Super Bowl winner, Terrell Suggs. That's right.
All right. Very good. But all right, let me pick somebody who I think was pretty good. Another guy who had another good week, largely stayed out of trouble, Arthur Mollett, but definitely did some positive things. He lost 2 tackles in this game where he got there first, and then the ball got fumbled, or got stripped by a second man. So the first time was on that right sideline. Ball gets stripped by Phillips. Phillips knocks it loose, and then Mollett recovered it. Yep. And Mollett, because of that, Mollett actually lost the primary tackle on that play. Now, you would much rather have the forced fumble recovery and the forced fumble, but it's just a weird dynamic that if you're holding the guy up and then somebody else knocks the ball loose, then the primary tackle automatically shifts. Same thing happens again in the same game where he's got a hold on, I think it was Warren and might have been Harris, and Moon literally stands up from underneath the tackle, and his shoulder dislodged the football. And it's honestly a place where a more experienced player probably doesn't even try and get up in that situation because of the injury risk that can accrue from that. But Moon did. He didn't know any better, and his shoulder hits the ball's out. I never did see definitive evidence of who recovered that football. But
yeah, Mollett, I'm not sure whether it's because he's not the starter and he wants to, put some good tape on, or whether it's playing his former team, but he was flying all over the field. He was definitely not a player who was taking it easy yesterday, and it showed. I mean, he flowed to the ball with regularity. He put himself in good position to be that guy when there was, a turnover opportunity to really, make a play on the ball, and he did. It was an impressive clean game from him. And normally when you notice a guy in the secondary, it's not a good thing, but in this instance, it was.
Yeah, Mollett now is stacking them up. Now it's 2 good games in a row with the game against Miami, and positive look for him heading into the playoffs. And they have some options. Ardarius Washington is maybe activated, and he may be a guy that they can turn to at slot corner. I don't think they necessarily will. I think they've seen enough now from Arthur Mollett that they wouldn't necessarily do that. Now, Ardarius Washington could still be a very valuable depth piece for the Ravens come these playoffs. But I don't think it's automatic. And Washington, it's been a sad story for him to lose the season after winning the slot corner role so cleanly coming out of camp.
Yeah, sort of a bit of a snake bitten position for the Ravens over the past couple seasons with Tavon Young, and Tavon Young, right?
Hey, well, he certainly had been snake bitten in his time with the Ravens. Yeah.
So for whatever reason, that slot corner position for a while, but now all of a sudden we've got some stability in the form of Hamilton with Mollett behind him, and hopefully Ardarius will be in a position to provide some depth. Yeah.
I guess Kyle Fuller also there injured. I mean, he barely was a Raven, but he was injured there real quickly. So lots of things like that. It's interesting because Kyle Fuller was benched twice for Denver the year before he came to the Ravens, and he was benched once for Ronald Darby. And those guys both came and ended up playing and actually being relied on by the Ravens at various times. So
we're just rehabilitating all these players. Send us your cheap players, or we'll make them Pro Bowl.
Yeah, we'll make them better players. That's been pretty cool. All right, so I think it's your turn again, right? I can't remember what.
Speaking of, people who secondary options that you normally don't want to hear too much about. Brandon Stevens, kept his name. Kept his name out of the announcers' mouths pretty much for the majority of the game. Don't think he was targeted too much, but that's he seemed to be really good in coverage. There was a long bomb tossed his way when he was in coverage of Deontay Johnson, and he was in just perfect coverage. Looked healthy. One of the most encouraging things from this game. I mean, you wish that the secondary depth was such. That he wouldn't be really playing too many meaningful snaps, but with injuries and other players needing to rest more, he stepped in there, got out healthy, and looked pretty good.
So according to PFF, that was the only time he was targeted the entire game, which is remarkable. But we remember Givens did not Givens is not the right game. Pickens did not have any targets to speak of in this game. He ran one jet sweep, I think, and they kept complaining about it pretty much the whole time. Part of this is weather, but part of it is Brandon Stevens has become a more imposing figure than he was earlier in the season when he was the most targeted quarterback in all of football.
Yeah, I mean, he's just continuing to play at a very high level, and he was certainly the best corner on the field yesterday. And I think not only the results but the targets sort of reflect that.
All right, one guy I want to talk about, make sure we talk about here is Michael Pierce. And obviously there's multiple reasons for that, but Michael Pierce has had a terrific season. He really has in terms of what he brings at that nose tackle position. He's provided a lot more pressure than he has in the past. He's been paired up on a fair amount of plays with Madubuike. And I think that they've been very complementary with each other. I did a little bit of complaining about not going to much 32 dime, but if you're gonna have those two guys on the field, they have proven to be a pretty useful pass rush pair to have on and complement each other with stunts a lot of times. And it's surprising, but it does not have to be Pierce who is the underneath guy. Pierce also is a fine with a big belly roll to stunt over another player, and that of course creates all kinds of blocking that has to be then reassigned and exchanged. That often benefits the underneath player, so the picking player will often get a big opportunity out of that. But anyway, I thought he's just done a terrific job for the Ravens this year. In that, we saw what he did against Arizona in terms of taking that game over with a couple of big 4th-and-1 plays. The Ravens re-signing him for 2 years, extending him, was probably the best news of Saturday for me.
Yeah, I agree. He's had a phenomenal year. He's continued to um, prove to be a reliable, dependable player. And to go from Travis Jones being your only, piece on the defensive line signed into next year, to having, Broderick Washington, Michael Pierce signed as well. I think that's a really, really good place for the Ravens to be going into the offseason, regardless of what ends up happening with Matabike. And also, just let's appreciate a couple things. Number one, how well Michael Pierce is playing. This late into his career. I mean, I do have a, my thought on that is between the COVID year and tearing his bicep last year, those were 2 years where he didn't accumulate a ton of massive tread.
Treadwear, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that certainly helps in that regard. But age is still what it is, and he's doing a great job. And also just to appreciate how amazing it is to have not one, not two, but three defensive linemen who can give you something both in the run game and the pass game.
Yeah, that is definitely a very big thing. And Travis Jones has proved to be that guy this year. But going back to Pierce for a second, the other thing I found amazing about him, the guy just turned 31 years old. And he's been a big part of Ravens defenses in the past, but really always as a two-down nose, never as anything more than that. This is the first year he's ever been more than that. And all of a sudden, he comes in here at age 30, turning 31 in November, and sets a career high in snaps by 46. It's 640 snaps this year. 594 in 2017 was his previous high. He was one hell of a run defender if you go back to then, but he hasn't lost a ton as a run defender. I think he's still outstanding in that regard. He gets some great push that is more than I think he's really ever had in his career before. And I didn't see his year at Minnesota. But Minnesota certainly got the short end of the stick, signing him for 3 years and getting a total of 251 snaps out of them. He's been a Raven. He's been a great Raven. And I don't know what it'll take, but I almost think if he played 2 more years in Baltimore, he would probably eclipse a player like Kelly Gregg in terms of how we thought about him. That'd have to be kind of 2 more years like this one. But if he were to do that, Kelly Gregg is just sitting just outside the Ring of Honor right now. What it would take for Kelly Gregg to make the Ring of Honor is for the Ravens to have about a 6-year really bad run. Then they're having to dip into their past to find the players that they need to include in the Ring of Honor. Either in those years or in the years that followed. And I think he could very well make it. I don't foresee that happening, by the way, but I think it could. And they've got other lesser lights in the Ring of Honor right now. Obviously, everybody points to Ernest Biner, but even not Ernest Biner, when you talk about players like Michael McCrary, who just didn't play for that long for the team. They did play, contribute to a great defense, but so did Kelly Gregg, certifiably in terms of the units he played for.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Pierce has 1 or 2 signature games, particularly one in the playoffs, where he comes up with a massive play or a series of stops to end drives. I could definitely see him becoming a Ring of Honor player. It's just such a great story seeing guys like him and McPhee, leave, get some money and then come back because they really appreciate, what they do here. Yeah.
Okay. So I called Michael Pierce. It's your turn again.
Let's see who we got here. Just take a quick look at my notes. I guess, I might just comment on some of these players who, I guess I'd talk about Yassine, just as a sort of.
If you found a $100 bill on the ground, you wouldn't walk past it. So don't pass up a chance at easy cash with MyBookie. MyBookie has the biggest online selection of odds and contests to fill all your sports betting needs, anytime, anywhere. So you can turn that sports knowledge into cash in your wallet. Bet on the NFL, college bowl games, or play for your share of big cash prizes in the weekly blackjack tournaments. And if you've been waiting for the right time to get in on the action, that time is now. Make your winning move today. Sign up at MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to claim your deposit match, redeemable up to $1,000. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your bonus. Experience the thrill of sports betting right from the comfort of your home. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
Interesting discussion here. You've seen, of course, some combination of him and Williams, but I think it was Yassine's responsibility primarily to cover Johnson on that 71-yard touchdown. That sort of was the deciding score. I don't know that we necessarily learned anything from this game as far as Yassine goes. I mean, I think that he was pretty steady in run support on a number of plays. Didn't look to be like, dogging it or anything like that necessarily. There's certainly not as much as Williams or some of the other players. But I was curious whether you thought he was a concern for you as a rotational player, as we go into the playoffs and may need to call on him for some snaps.
I don't really consider him a rotational player. I mean, he's a emergency depth piece, but I don't think he's going to be part of the starting group on the outside. We have Stevens back. Presumably they'll have Marlon Humphrey back, who's another player we haven't mentioned as being missing from this game, but presumably he'll be back for the playoffs. And then they'll have hopefully Hamilton in the slot. That is an incredibly imposing front to any set of defenders. I was actually, I guess I say I'm a little disappointed in Williams on that particular play, not being where I kind of hoped he would have been to take away the back end. But then on the other hand, part of me says they threw the ball short all game. They were obviously, dinking and dunking the whole game. This is the one time, they get the ball over the safety's head. It's just, we've been through so many football games this year where the safeties basically have been like the Lord of the Nazgul back there, two of them, and no quarterback has been willing to throw into that. I'm more happy. I'm probably a little more frustrated with what happened to Williams on that play that he did not continue to take away Johnson on the deep route.
I agree, and I guess I also wonder. I mean, Tyreek Hill touchdown. I think Williams was a little out of position on that one too. If I recall correctly, he should have. Maybe not so much out of position, but more so he should have been cheating to Tyreek Hill's side of the field because he was really the only deep threat that you could have been concerned about. So hopefully there's a little bit of teach tape in there just to sort of just be like, hey, we know you can do better. Kind of work on that. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately whether this has almost evolved into a conversation about Marcus Williams, but Marcus Williams or Yassine, I think it was more so the circumstances of the game than having a concern about either of those guys.
Yeah, Marcus Williams, by the way, nearly had a interception that it looked to me like he would have had a pretty clean field to run on. The wide receivers were all either towards the sideline or way back. I don't know how much effort they were going to immediately be able to turn on. Yeah. But Williams was moving in the right direction to potentially have to beat maybe a running back and a bunch of offensive linemen. Other than that, to score. Really unfortunate that he dropped that football, but the fact that you get in position to deflect the football like that is also a positive thing. I think people even think back to Ed Reed and think Ed Reed caught every single ball that was ever thrown his way. Far from it. Ed Reed was just in position to have an unbelievable number of balls drop in his general vicinity because of how spectacularly gifted and how he could get in the mind of the opposing quarterback.
Just unreal. I mean, it's hard to explain to people who weren't there how, if a game started to get away, you could almost, you almost felt like, I guess it's time for Ed to come in and, pick it off for us and have a reasonable expectation that it would happen because he was that good.
Yeah. They'd send him back and he was kind of a designated fair catcher on punts. This is one of the Ed Reed stories I kind of love. But there's two plays where he really came back. The first was in the 2007 opener at Cincinnati. He returned a punt to put the Ravens up 20-19 in a game that they might have lost in 2019, but he put them up. And I think he did put them up 2019 in a game they had no business being in against the Bengals, who pretty badly outplayed them in the game. But it was just, Ed Reed now is a punt returner for a touchdown. And then there was another one where they really had him in there to get a fair catch at Minnesota on a game that was ultimately lost on a Hauschka missed field goal in 2009. And that game, the punt went up. Reed actually muffed it for the only time I can ever remember him, muffing a punt, picked it right up on the ground and then ran with it and for about 9 yards or something to pick up some yardage. And the Ravens were immediately, in field goal range. And actually they needed a touchdown at that point. And they scored that. And before the game got away from them. So anyway, read the punt returner, read the anything was fun to watch on a football team. When there's any chance Ed Reed could get the ball, it was fun.
Just an unreal player. Not likely to see one like him again.
All right, we got a couple of mailbag questions. How about we jumped into those here real quickly? And we got some of the old guard delivering again for us. But, okay. Captain Grigson's hair. That's at Stewie Leon. At Stewie Leon. Says, assuming you will hit on these in the discussion, but if you don't, one, how concerned are you about run defense versus a team that can pass well out of heavy formations, such as the Bills and the Dolphins, but not the Steelers? Legitimate question.
Well, I'm not that concerned about. I'm really more concerned when it comes to the Bills. I'm really more concerned about the problems that Josh Allen presents to a defense running the ball. Gabe Davis is having a better season, to my eye than he's had in the past, but it's still mostly Stephon Diggs and not a whole lot else. And we kind of saw how that plays out against the Dolphins last week. Dolphins were down Jalen Waddle. So it was pretty much Tyreek Hill and then just a bunch of guys. And I think we handled that pretty well, but imagine Tua being able to, run over DBs and some linebackers, and that's not a lot of fun. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the notion that the quarterback himself has to present a problem for it to be more of an issue there. So I think he's identified a couple of good ones in terms of the Bills and the Dolphins, because the Bills use extra tight ends. The Dolphins, I think, when I talked about this with Josh Reed, I guess it was the last week, talked about who represents the biggest challenge for this Ravens team going forward in the AFC playoffs. Not a lot of people would say it's San Francisco again. I probably agree with them, but who represents the biggest challenge in terms of an offense in the AFC? I think it actually could still be a healthy Miami, that if they have their act together, certainly rooting for them to beat the Bills and knock the Bills entirely out, but that's because one of the two of them is gone. But I think a healthy Miami with Mostert, Waddle, Tyreek Hill still, and Achane would be, potentially exactly the kind of kryptonite that this Ravens team would not want to face. So it's as well as easily as they took care of Miami in that game, and as bad as Miami's offensive line looked, I still would be concerned about facing them again in the playoffs. So I think that the Dolphins, they play some heavy, they play a lot of light formations too, and I think they could potentially be very effective. And when I say light, it could be some pony with two fast wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Those guys, they have a bunch of home run hitters, and they can, a team like that can score at any time. I mean, The nice thing is that even with that full complement of weapons, they haven't really gotten it done against winning football teams, whether that's mental mistakes, whether that's their defense not stepping up, or Tua being a little bit too statuesque. There are a lot of guys on that offense who can make plays, and if they're at 100% next time we see them, if we see them again, it will definitely be a tough battle.
All right. At Stewie Leone had a second question, which was rank the divisional opponents from most to least desirable. So let's put both Miami and Buffalo in there together. We'll put Jacksonville. Actually, it becomes very difficult if it's anybody but Jacksonville. So just put Jacksonville. I'm sure that if it's the Texans, it's going to be the lowest of the divisional opponents anyway. And then Kansas City. So Jacksonville, Kansas City, Miami, Buffalo. How would you rank them in terms of the amount of fear you have of them?
Well, there's also Cleveland.
These are just the divisional opponents. Oh, I don't know. Maybe he means that. Maybe he means the AFC North, but I thought he meant the division leaders.
Oh, I assumed he just meant
rank them all.
AFC potential AFC opponents.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to put my list together while you're thinking your way through it. So we have Cleveland. We have Houston is in right now. We have the potential of Jacksonville. We have Kansas City. We have Miami. We have Buffalo. And who else am I missing?
And then Steelers are another possibility.
Pittsburgh. There's
I guess Steelers are the
it's Pitt or Jax.
Yeah.
Pitt or Jax or Buffalo. Two of those three will make it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So let's rank those 7 teams from 1 to 7 in terms of danger. I'm going to go ahead and do it, and we'll let you take the floor here.
So we're saying most dangerous first.
Yeah, sure. Most dangerous first.
Okay, most dangerous first, I think, is Miami, assuming health.
Okay, and I probably
for all the reasons that we just discussed. And
I think that's reasonable. I would probably say I would put Buffalo in the number 1 spot ahead of Miami, because I think the question there was about offense. Miami does not present much otherwise to the Ravens offense to try and stop them. But I would have them just different order 1, 2. I'm assuming you have Buffalo number 2, or maybe you don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's either Buffalo or Cleveland are at 2 and 3 for me. I gotta believe that Joe Flacco is gonna. He just throws so many interceptable balls, and hasn't played too many defenses that have taken the opportunities he's given them. But that defense is just so ferocious. And obviously Flacco has, I think, more playoff experience than, maybe not recent playoff experience, but more playoff experience than any other quarterback here, except, maybe Mahomes has caught up to him in terms of games, but yeah, those would be my top 3.
Yeah, Mahomes only played 11 postseason games. Hasn't Flacco played more than that? I'm thinking he has, but maybe
has not. To have. Yeah.
Okay, so I have Kansas City at number 3. So you have Cleveland in there, obviously somewhere, but I have Kansas City at 3. I still think that the combination of Mahomes and their pass rush is going to be a challenge for the Ravens. I would agree. I think that Miami and Buffalo are both bigger challenges, which is incredible that we're saying this, I think, particularly about Miami. But I think Kansas City still, I fear Mahomes enough and their pass rush enough that they're the third one.
And the reason that I probably put Cleveland above Kansas City is that I think that Cleveland's offensive personnel actually matches up better against the Ravens than Kansas City's does. We saw how difficult it was for the secondary to bring down Njoku and Ford when he got into the second level. There's also just that familiarity aspect that's a little annoying, and I find that the Ravens do well against teams who they don't see multiple times in a season, whether it's divisional rival or see them again in the playoffs. I think this version of Kansas City will be surprised at the explosiveness of the Ravens offense, regardless of having seen it on film. It's one thing to see it on film. It's another thing to see it in person. I think we catch them off guard a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you and I basically have the same top 4. It's pretty clear, which is some combination of Miami, Buffalo, Cleveland, and Kansas City.
Yeah. Those would be the top 4. After that, my number 5 team is Houston.
Agreed.
I think with C.J. Stroud, I really did not want to see him again at all in the playoffs. Now it looks like they might win the South, so they'll play at home versus Cleveland. And now I'm good with that. I love for C.J. Stroud to knock out the Browns because I think the Browns really might be bringing the kryptonite the Ravens would have a hard time with.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of look at Houston the way that I look at the Colts coming in to play the Ravens in 2012. A phenom at quarterback, but playoffs is a different animal. Even though he played a pretty solid game against us, we definitely were not the team that we were then. We've come a long way since then. I think we would have a good game plan and throw some things at him that he hasn't seen, but he's spectacular. CJ Stroud is spectacular, and the future looks bright in Houston. And yeah.
Where do you have Jacksonville and Pittsburgh ranked? Who's your 6 and 7 there?
So it's a little hard for me. I think, if Jacksonville is healthy, I might pick Jacksonville. But, then again, Pittsburgh, I mean, it's just they have this familiarity. The defense knows how to play Lamar. I'm gonna put Pittsburgh above Jacksonville. I'm talking myself into it.
I don't have a problem with that order at all. So we're good. Anyway, appreciate the question. Thank you, Stewie Leone. We'll move on. And we had one more at least out here. Let's see. We have Angela of 85. That's at Nikki 622A. She always has good ones, but here it is. Looking at the film, did you notice a lot of brother-in-law play, as you often describe it? Was there more vanilla play calling? Also, how big is Pierce re-signing, and do you expect the other moves? Do you expect any other moves? That's important. Finally, with Simpson breakout, is Queen gone? Boy, lots of questions there. But why don't you take any one of those that you'd like, and then I'll take one.
Yeah, so I'll sort of combine brother-in-law play and vanilla play calling. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as brother-in-law play, more so just but practically speaking, it has the same effect. Just sort of not just sort of being careful to not get yourself injured or get into piles so much as being smart. And it's a little bit different than it's just a little bit different than like the two teams having a mutual understanding. One team is playing hard because they want to get into the playoffs, and we're just trying to get out safe. So there's definitely, I think they a lot of the players took their foot off the gas on that. Right. Anything to add to that, Ken?
No, I think we hit on the vanilla stuff. It was basically all the standard nickel and base. So we got that. In terms of the brother-in-law play, I think you said it well in terms of, you probably had some people who were specifically told, take it easy on the pile. And Patrick Queen in the middle of that defense is probably shouldn't have been one of those players, but it really seemed like he kind of was, which tells me they should have just played Simpson the whole game. So if we're going to transition to the next question, is Queen gone? I don't think it has anything to do with Trenton Simpson being here. I think it's fully a case of the Ravens can't afford to pay a second inside linebacker. So Queen will go. We thank him for his service and wish him well in future endeavors that do not involve the AFC. And hopefully he'll go and play well for Carolina or some other team that really wants to sign him to a big contract.
Thanks for the comp pick, PQ.
Yeah. Much appreciated. In the case of and I mean no disrespect by that. By the way, he's going to go somewhere. He's going to probably get paid. The fact that he might get paid by a team like Carolina is just a function of that's the type of team that is more likely to give a really big contract to an inside linebacker is some team that needs leadership like that and might not have it. But anyway, he could end up in a lot of places, but Carolina being an NFC team would be a nice spot for him from my perspective. The Pierce signing, yeah, the Pierce signing, obviously made our day, as we talked about a little earlier. The next guy I want them to have on the agenda is Brandon Stevens. He's ending his third year here. It'll be after the season is the very first opportunity to sign him to a long deal. So this is important. They could be talking about it now, but they can't be signing anything until after the season is over. So that will come. I don't know whether they have to wait till March this year. They just have to wait for the playoffs to be over to re-sign a player like Simpson. I believe they only have to wait for the third season to be done, which would mean after whenever they're eliminated to go ahead and sign him.
Yeah, I think Stevens is a priority re-sign. He gives us stability at the corner position. We really thought that cornerback was going to be a real problem. It was going to be, Marlon Humphrey and some scrub was going to be playing, and just have a bunch of scrubs. But Stevens has really turned it on and proven that he can be a starting corner in this league. So I think he's a priority re-sign. And then the other thing, that has been discussed numerous times is, how we're going to approach Madubuike. I think the tag is in his future, because with his level of play, with what the market is like for D linemen, the tag amount is not an outrageous, amount for his services. But ideally, the tag is going to either lead to a long-term extension or a tag and trade scenario that will allow us to pick up some considerable trade capital that we could then go use on something like a left tackle, and which is really, barring some precipitous drop on draft day, would probably be one of the only ways that we could pick up a day one left tackle.
Yeah, I think there are supposed to be about 6 of them that go in the first round. Once you're at that point, there may be some stretches. There may be some guys who really should be drafted number 42 and are going in the first round because they are left tackles, and then that's a big give up of BPA for need. Those things always compete. But I'm like you. I would rather see they do something with Madubuike, and it's one of the hardest pills to swallow, to let a great player who's just, I've never seen anything negative written about Justin Madubuike in terms of what kind of teammate he is or what kind of person he is. I mean, it just seems every single thing you hear is positive. Yet this is the struggle that great organizations find themselves in, is they have to constantly making heartbreaking decisions about their star young talent.
Absolutely.
All right. Got one more question. Alec Poulianis, great friend of the show, been on the show a number of times, and he has the pod, One Winning Pod. I want you to try and give that a chance sometime, see if it's to your liking. But Alec is on there with a couple of his friends, and I think he's an interesting guy that is some real thoughtful analysis of the game. But he says, how bad must Salah be to not get a snap in that slop fest of backups?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't speak well of him. I mean, they probably did 15 different iterations of the offensive line, and Salah wasn't involved in any of them. You'd hope that maybe he's dinged up or something. Not that you're ever hoping anybody's injured, but you're hoping that that's the reason rather than just them not feeling comfortable with him being out there. I mean, he had been out there in prior weeks. So I'm not really sure, what the thought process there was. I mean, Ben Cleveland got an extended look for the entirety of the game. So you'd think that Salah would probably come in there. Do you recall whether? Yeah, I'm sure. Can you do that? Whether Salah, where on the offensive line Salah played this past few weeks?
I mean, he's played at left guard, but he has not played a single snap on the offensive line this year.
Did I? Oh, okay. Then I'm sure I was probably just thinking of Fale, getting some snaps in recently. Yeah, I mean that's my mistake then. But yeah, no, I mean I do think it's an indictment of their comfort with him, given how many rotational pieces they had in on the line.
Yeah, so there's 4 players that didn't play. Roquan Smith didn't play, and he's nursing some things. So is Queen, by the way. Queen, keeps talking about his collarbone. He got cleated in the collarbone by Tua on that last snap, or Tua got injured as well. It's surprising that he did play in some ways, but Ronald Darby did not play, and that was, we think, illness related. And Josh Johnson did not play, which is third quarterback related. There's no other place for Josh Johnson to go in on the field. Humphrey, honestly, is one of the few players that can actually use the reps at this point in the season, probably live fire reps, to get ready for whatever playoff time might be ahead of him. And we don't even want to think about it. But, one of the things about backup quarterbacks is the preseason is never quite long enough for them to get enough play to take them all the way through the season, such that if you ever do need to call on them, they can still be effective. So there's still, that live fire has had value to a player like Huntley, I think. But then the other one was Saleh, and he didn't see action. And the big one on the defense was Pepe Williams not seeing action anywhere in the defensive backfield. Very surprising.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where he ends up next season, Saleh, and on the development curve.
Very last question I think we've addressed already, but also, do you think it was a horrid roster decision to elevate bench Mason? Interesting. I think he's being funny here. Ben Mason over Lucien when the secondary options were sparse. Absolutely, yes. It was an atrocity. It was a poor decision,
you could very reasonably think that had Lucien been up there taking some of the snaps, Geno Stone might not have been out there when he got injured.
Absolutely.
And it's a very real consequence. Luckily, it seems like the injury wasn't too serious based on what we've heard.
Now, Lucien has had a chance to leave the Ravens in theory. I mean, he was cut, on the street. In fact, I think the Ravens probably, since they re-signed him so quickly, they probably had kind of a Daryl Worley 2022 understanding with him that he would be back. And they wanted to make sure that he knew he was still loved here, and they're happy to have him again. Obviously, by re-signing him, that's the way you really make him believe that, even if it's just the practice squad. This is something he's going to go into next year. He'll still have his full 4 years of the clock hasn't started running yet. He's had a great opportunity to learn and practice with the Ravens this year, and I'm very hopeful that he's going to be a guy who understand it. In talking to the guy, he's very smart, really understands things, and you can be that, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything for your position. At the safety position, there are so many moving parts to that role. I think it is the perfect fit for Jeremy Lucien. I think he's a much better safety than he is a corner, which is much more of a I got to be better than you position in order to keep up with it. And I'm not saying there's not thinking at corner. Of course there is. Of course there's zone coverage and whatnot concepts that come in at corner. But I really like, in theory, what Lucien could be for this team.
Yeah, no, I listened to that podcast. I enjoyed getting to know him a little bit better as a person, and I think he could definitely have a role on this team going in next season. So I was excited when I saw we got him back, and I just think it's a shame that he didn't get an opportunity to play today, because he'd been on the practice squad for most of the season. So it's not like, it's not like Dalvin Cook, who just arrived here and hasn't had any time with the team.
Yeah, did Dalvin Cook? This is from at Filmstudy Ravens, who put in this to pounce on Filmstudy hashtag Filmstudy mailbag. Did Dalvin Cook just move ahead of Josh Gordon on the depth chart with Josh
maybe.
Gordon's bubble?
Maybe. I mean, we'll have to see how he plays, but I don't think he had a reputation for being a fumbler. I think he has a reputation for giving you a little bit in the pass game. I hope ideally, none of those guys will see a single snap in the postseason. But it's good to have options. What can I say?
Yeah. All right. Slava, just a complete pleasure doing this. We said we weren't going to go 2 hours today after a game like that was just a horrible mess, but this is more than that. We're talking about the future of the team and what's going on. And I really appreciate having on, spending some time with us. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right. If you're still listening at this point, I know one of the really loyal listeners of the show. One thing we ask is do one of two things if you can. Either tell somebody about the show. You can do that in any medium at all, but ideally an older person one-on-one that you can show how to directly play the episode off filmstudybaltimore.com is a great way to get people involved and hopefully listening to the pod some. The second thing you do is if you want to write a 50-word 5-star review, we love for that to happen on Spotify. And there's a lot of great reviews out there, but each time one is written, it helps the algorithm decide, how people are directed to pods or given a palette of pods to choose from. So you're really helping us when you do that. Slava, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.